They say a bride's wedding morning should be a symphony of laughter, the scent of fresh peonies, and the effervescent pop of champagne corks. But my morning at the family's summer estate in the Hamptons began with a silence as cold and sterile as surgical steel. My name is Virginia. I am 42 years old, and today I am marrying a man my parents would rather see me dead than welcome as a son-in-law. I stood before the antique vanity in my childhood bedroom, smoothing the fabric of the simple wedding dress I had purchased myself. There was no Vera Wang label, no imported French lace, no team of stylists hovering with hairspray. It was just white silk, elegant and understated. Downstairs, I could hear the faint clinking of fine china as the staff prepared breakfast. My father Sterling and my mother Dolores were undoubtedly sitting at the head of the mahogany table, drinking black coffee and pretending that today wasn't happening. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. Russell was waiting for me in the guest cottage, a structure my parents usually reserved for the help, struggling with a tie he wasn't used to wearing. Russell is a carpenter. He has calloused hands roughened by years of gripping hammers and planing oak hands that have built sturdy homes for families but are viewed by my parents as the dirty hands of a servant. Virginia. The bedroom door opened without a knock. My mother Dolores stepped in. She was wearing a dress of steel gray silk, a shade more appropriate for a funeral than a wedding. Her hair was coiffed into a perfect immovable helmet, and her face was painted to mask the sheer contempt burning in her eyes. "Mother," I replied, turning around, "did you come up to help me with the zipper?" Dolores let out a scoff, a short, sharp sound like a dry twig snapping. She circled me, her gaze sweeping over my dress, as if inspecting a piece of furniture for defects. "I came up to see if you had come to your senses, but it seems you are determined to carry this charade to its bitter end." "It's not a charade, Mother. It is my wedding." "A wedding," she repeated the word dripping with sarcasm. "To a repairman. Sterling and I have told everyone at the club that this is a small private ceremony due to your delicate health. I simply could not bear the thought of the Vanderbilts or the Rockefellers knowing that the eldest daughter of the Belmont line is marrying a man who likely doesn't know which fork to use for the fish course. Russell is a good man, Mother. He loves me." "Love doesn't pay the maintenance fees on this estate, Virginia," she interrupted, adjusting the pearl choker at her throat. "Your sister Arlene just called. She and Preston are running late. She said she didn't want to arrive too early and have to witness this mess for longer than necessary. You see, even your sister is embarrassed for you." I turned back to the mirror, looking at the woman reflected there. I was no longer the 20-year-old girl desperate for their approval, but her words still sliced through me, sharp as a diamond cutter. "If you and Dad are so ashamed as he," I said, my voice shaking but firm, "you don't have to attend." Dolores walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the brass knob. "Oh, we will attend, Virginia. We will sit in the front row. We will smile, because the Belmonts never air their dirty laundry in public. But do not mistake our presence for a blessing. When you walk down that aisle, realize this: you are walking alone." The door clicked shut. The silence returned heavier than before. I looked down at my left hand, where the modest engagement ring Russell had crafted himself from maple wood and white gold sat on my finger. I knew today would be a battle, but I didn't know that the real weapon hadn't even been drawn yet. To understand why my marriage was viewed as such a catastrophe, you have to understand the shadow. I grew up under my sister Arlene. In the Belmont household, Arlene was the masterpiece, and I was the rough draft. Arlene is 5 years younger than me, but she has always been miles ahead of me in our parents' eyes. Arlene had the naturally golden hair, the radiant smile of a pageant queen, and the innate ability to manipulate social situations that my father Sterling always coveted in an heir. At 24, Arlene married Preston, the son of one of New York's biggest investment bankers. Their wedding was held at the Plaza Hotel with 500 guests and was featured on the front page of the New York Times style section. It was the pinnacle of perfection my parents had spent their lives cultivating. In contrast, I was always the difficult one. I had mild dyslexia as a child, which made navigating prestigious private schools a torture. While Arlene took ballet and piano, I hid in my grandmother Wilma's old library, reading books on architecture and botany. I preferred soil under my fingernails to a French manicure. I preferred the silence of structural blueprints to the noise of cocktail chatter. Around 10 a.m., the gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of Arlene and Preston's sleek black Bentley. I watched from the second-floor window. Arlene stepped out looking immaculate in a royal blue designer dress and oversized sunglasses. Preston followed, adjusting his gold cufflinks, looking handsome, but radiating that specific brand of arrogance that comes from never having been told no. They walked into the house as if they owned the deed. I heard Arlene greeting Mother in the foyer. "Oh, Mother darling. I'm sorry we're late. The traffic on the LIE was horrendous. Preston insisted we stop by the office to check the Dow Jones." "It's fine, darling." My mother's voice instantly shifted, becoming sweet and warm, a tone she never used with me. "I'm just glad you're here. At least I have someone of class to speak with today." Moments later, Arlene breezed into my room. She didn't knock, of course. She stepped in, removed her sunglasses, and looked me up and down. "Well," Arlene drawled. "So you're actually doing this. Preston and I had a bet on the way here. He thought you'd get cold feet and run away." "I love him, Arlene," I said, keeping my composure as I put on a pair of pearl earrings, the only gift Grandmother Wilma had left me before she passed. Arlene sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to wrinkle her silk skirt. "Love, you sound so quaint. Virginia, look at me. Preston and I, we are a team. Marriage is a merger of assets of status. What do you think Russell can offer you? Where is he going to take you to Home Depot on a Saturday?" "Russell brings me peace. That is something I have never seen in your eyes, Arlene." Arlene's smile stiffened for a fraction of a second. I had hit a nerve. Everyone in our circle knew Preston had mistresses, young models in Manhattan, but Arlene accepted it as part of the contract. She got the unlimited black card, he got his freedom. "Peace doesn't buy first-class tickets to Paris, big sister." Arlene stood up, regaining her superiority. "Anyway, good luck. Dad is furious. He's been drinking scotch since 9 a.m. Try not to embarrass him further when you read your vows." She walked out, leaving a cloud of aggressive Chanel number 5 in the air. I watched her leave, feeling a strange sense of pity. Arlene was a perfect doll in a display case, but I knew that inside the porcelain there were hairline cracks. I might be the outcast, but at least today I was free. I met Russell 2 years ago. A winter storm had damaged the vaulted ceiling of the old library in the West Wing, the room that housed Grandmother Wilma's precious book collection. My father Sterling had hired a massive contracting firm to fix it, but they sent Russell, their master craftsman, to oversee the detailed woodwork. I remember the first time I saw him. He was standing on scaffolding sawdust, dusting the shoulders of his flannel shirt, meticulously carving a replacement for a broken piece of molding. He worked with a reverence and tenderness I rarely saw people treat other humans with, let alone objects. I brought him coffee and we talked. Not about the stock market or galas, but about wood grain, the history of the house, and how things were built to last. 6 months later, I invited him to dinner to meet the family. It was the biggest mistake of my life, but it was also the moment I saw my parents' true faces. The dinner took place in the main dining room beneath a crystal chandelier worth $50,000. Russell wore his best suit. It was a little tight in the shoulders because of his build, the build of a man who worked for a living. He brought a gift, a cigar humidor he had handcrafted from black walnut polished to a mirror shine. "Mr. Belmont," Russell said, presenting the gift with 2 hands. "I made this myself. I heard you enjoy Cuban cigars." My father didn't even stand up. He swirled his red wine, looking at the wooden box on the table as if it were a dead rodent. "Wood?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "I usually prefer sterling silver or Italian leather, but I suppose the effort is noted." My mother Dolores sat opposite, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. So, Mr. Russell, you say you are a carpenter, meaning you install kitchen cabinets. I am a restoration specialist, Mrs. Belmont, Russell corrected gently. I specialize in restoring historic properties and antique furniture. I ensure the legacy of the past doesn't rot away. How quaint, Preston, my brother-in-law chuckled. In other words, you're the guy who cleans up our messes when the mansions get too old. The whole table erupted in laughter except for me and Russell. My face burned. Russell is an artist, I spoke up, my voice shaking with rage. He has more talent in his pinky finger than anyone in this room. My father set his wine glass down hard enough to splash the vintage liquid onto the tablecloth. Enough, Virginia. Do not romanticize manual labor. He earns a living with sweat. We earn a living with intellect and capital. There is a class difference here that you are willfully ignoring. He turned to Russell, his eyes cold as ice. Young man, I don't know what game you are playing with my daughter. Perhaps you think this family is your winning lottery ticket. But let me be clear, my daughter may be naive, but I am not. You will never set foot in this family as an equal. Russell stood up. He didn't yell, he didn't slam the table. He just looked Sterling Belmont in the eye with a terrifying calmness. I don't need your money, Mr. Belmont, and I certainly don't need the approval of a man who measures worth by the thickness of a wallet rather than the thickness of character. Russell left immediately. That night my parents forbade me from seeing him. They thought their decree was law. They were wrong. Their cruelty only pushed me closer to him, to the only place I felt valued. Of all the people in the Belmont bloodline, only one person ever understood me, Grandmother Wilma. She passed away 3 years ago, but her presence still lingered in the corners of the estate. Wilma was not like my father. She was the true founder of the family business empire. My grandfather died young, and it was Wilma with her grit and sharp intellect who turned a small textile company into a massive real estate conglomerate. She hated vanity. She hated the way my parents spent money on frivolous things and the way they looked down on the people who worked for them. On Sundays, when my parents went golfing, I would sit with her in the Orchid Conservatory. She taught me how to read people, how to read contracts, and most importantly, how to stand on my own 2 feet. Virginia, she once told me, her weathered hands clasping mine. You are the only one in this house who has my heart. Sterling is too greedy. Arlene is too weak. But you have the eyes of a builder. You see the structure beneath the facade. In her final days as she lay in hospice care at home, she called me close. Russell was just a friend then, not a lover, but I had told her about him, about how he fixed the library, about the respect he had for the old wood. Her eyes had lit up. A man who respects the old ways is a man to trust, Ginny. Keep him close. Then she whispered something I thought was delirium. I left something for you, not in the public will. Sterling would tear that apart like a vulture. I left it safe. On the day you marry, if you marry for the right reasons, it will find you. Mr. Henderson knows what to do. Mr. Henderson was her longtime personal attorney, an ancient but sharp man, whom my father had tried to fire for years, but couldn't because he held too many of the company's secrets. When Wilma passed, my parents were disappointed that she had donated a large portion of her liquid assets to historical preservation societies. The rest, including the controlling shares of the company and the estates, was put into a family trust managed by my father, but he didn't own it outright. He was merely a beneficiary. I had forgotten her mysterious promise. I thought it was just the comfort of a dying grandmother. For the last 3 years, my parents lived like kings and queens on that trust, believing they held the power of life and death over our finances. They didn't know that Wilma, with her incredible foresight, had planted a time bomb right in the foundation of their empire, and the fuse of that bomb was my wedding. 1 week before the wedding, my father summoned me to his study. The room smelled of expensive cigar smoke and old leather. Sterling sat behind the massive mahogany desk, while my mother Dolores sat on a velvet sofa holding a martini, even though it was only 2:00 p.m. Sit down, Virginia, my father commanded, not looking up from a file. I sat in the guest chair, feeling as small as a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. Your mother and I have been discussing this. Sterling began, taking off his reading glasses. We cannot allow this marriage to destroy the family reputation. Therefore, I have a proposition. He slid a thick envelope across the desk toward me. This is a cashier's check for $500,000 and the deed to a luxury condo in Manhattan. It is all yours immediately. I looked at the envelope, then at him. In exchange for what? In exchange for calling off this wedding. Dolores spoke up, her voice icy. You will break up with the carpenter. You will go to Europe for 6 months until the gossip dies down. When you return, we will arrange for you to meet appropriate suitors. Senator Miller's son just got divorced. He is very— No, I cut her off. I pushed the envelope back toward him. I am not selling my life, Dad. Not for $500,000, not for $50 million. My father's face turned a mottled red. He slammed his hand on the desk. You are a fool. Do you think love will feed you if you walk out that door and marry him? I will cut off every dime of support. You will be removed from the trust. You will receive nothing from your grandmother's estate. I will strike you from my will. You will no longer be a Belmont. Sterling is right, my mother added, taking a sip of her drink. Do you think the working-class life is romantic? Wait until you have to worry about the electric bill or the price of milk when your hands are rough and your face is lined with worry. Do not come crawling back here crying. My heart hammered in my chest. The threat was real. If I married Russell, I would lose every financial safety net I had ever known. I would be destitute. I stood up, looking at both of them. Mom, Dad, you have money, power, everything, but you are poorer than anyone I have ever met. You have no respect for each other and no love for your children. Russell may not be rich, but he is rich in dignity. And I would rather live in a shack he built with his own hands than live in this cold mausoleum with you. I turned to walk away. You will regret this, my father roared behind me. You are throwing your life away, Virginia. I closed the study door. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt my lungs fill with clean air. I had chosen, and I had chosen myself. Back to the wedding morning. The ceremony took place in the small garden behind the greenhouse, the only place on the estate where I felt I belonged. We had set up only about 40 white chairs. On one side sat Russell's family and friends, carpenters, artists, simple people with warm smiles and calloused hands. On the other side sat my family parents, Arlene Preston, and a few relatives like Aunt Maxine and Aunt Lucille, women who came only to satisfy their morbid curiosity. As the violin music started, played by a friend of Russell's, I stepped out. There was no one to walk me down the aisle. My father had refused to do it at the last minute as a final punishment. He stood with his arms crossed in the front row, scowling as if supervising a bankruptcy hearing. I walked alone across the grass, my head held high. As I passed my family's row, the poisonous whispers began to snake into my ears. Look at that dress, Aunt Maxine whispered to my mother, loud enough for me to hear. Plain as a sheet, probably off the rack at a department store. Poor girl. And the groom, Aunt Lucille chimed in, covering her mouth with a paper fan. That suit is definitely a rental. Look at the sleeves, a bit short. He looks more like a bodyguard than a groom. It's a disgrace to the lineage, Arlene whispered to Preston. I can't believe we have to sit here and witness this. I tried to block it all out. I focused on Russell. He was standing under the arbor of roses, his eyes shining with tears. He looked at me, not like a damaged piece of merchandise, but like a treasure. When I reached him, he took my hand. His hand was warm, rough, and steady. You look beautiful, he whispered, just for me. Don't mind them. It's just you and me. The ceremony was quick. The minister was an old friend of Grandmother Wilma. As we exchanged vows, I felt the weight of judgment from the left side of the aisle. They weren't crying tears of joy. My mother was checking her watch. My father was staring at his phone. Arlene was whispering something to Preston and giggling. But when Russell slid the ring onto my finger and said, With this ring, I give you all that I have and all that I am. I knew I had won. I had something their money could never buy: authenticity. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister said. We kissed. Applause broke out enthusiastic from Russell's side and scattered pitiful and reluctant from my family's side. I turned to look at them. My father clapped twice and stopped, his face a mask of stone. My mother didn't even clap. She was busy adjusting her silk scarf. They thought they were punishing me with their coldness. They didn't know that a storm was approaching, and it was about to wash away their arrogance. The reception was held under a white tent on the east lawn. Although I wanted everything simple, my mother, fearing loss of face with the neighbors, had ordered the household staff to prepare an acceptable buffet. The atmosphere inside the tent was as tight as a violin string. The two groups of guests remained completely segregated. Russell's group was cheerful, raising beers and laughing. My family sat stiffly sipping champagne, looking across the aisle as if observing wild animals in a zoo. Halfway through the reception, my father, Sterling, stood up. He grabbed the microphone and tapped a spoon against his glass, creating a sharp ding-ding that demanded attention. The tent went silent. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed, smooth and authoritative, the voice he used in board meetings. Today is a memorable day for the Belmont family. He paused, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We all know Virginia has always been a special child. She has always made unique choices. And today she has made her boldest choice yet. He turned to look at me and Russell, his eyes full of condescension. Russell, I must commend you. You are a brave man. Not many men of such humble origins would dare to dream of stepping into this world. But our Virginia has always had a charitable heart. She has always enjoyed rescuing broken things. A ripple of giggles came from Marlene and the aunts. Russell's jaw tightened, but he squeezed my hand under the table. My father continued. So let us raise a glass to the happy couple. May Virginia find happiness in the simple life she has chosen. And to Russell, good luck trying to maintain the standard of living my daughter is accustomed to. Although I fear starting tomorrow, Virginia will have to learn how to do her own laundry. He raised his glass, finishing the speech with a public humiliation, turning my wedding into a joke and my husband into an incompetent gold digger. Hear, hear, my relatives chanted, their tone mocking. I started to stand up, ready to scream at him, but Russell held me back. Don't, he whispered. Don't let him see you lose control. That's what he wants. But our stoic silence was broken. Not by me, but by a man stepping onto the stage from the back of the tent. It was Mr. Henderson, grandmother Wilma's ancient attorney. He wore a dated black suit and carried a battered leather briefcase. He walked slowly but with purposeful strides, heading straight for my father. Apologies for the interruption, Sterling. Mr. Henderson's voice crackled over the microphone, raspy but clear. But I believe there is one more toast that needs to be given. A toast that has been waiting for 3 years. My father frowned, lowering his glass. Henderson, what the hell are you doing here? This is a private event. You weren't invited. I don't need your invitation, Sterling. Mr. Henderson replied calmly, opening his leather briefcase right on the podium. I am here under the direct orders of Wilma Belmont. She instructed me to be present at her granddaughter Virginia's wedding and to read a letter. A letter with legal standing. The tent buzzed. The name Wilma Belmont was still a legend. My mother Dolores shot up from her seat. What is this nonsense? My mother-in-law has been dead for 3 years. The will was read. You are senile. Security, get him out. I advise you to sit down, Dolores, Mr. Henderson said, his voice hardening. If you remove me, you will be in violation of the Belmont Trust's enforcement clause, and I assure you, you will not like the consequences. My father went pale. He signaled the security guards to stand down. Let him speak, Sterling hissed through his teeth. Let's see what little drama he has cooked up. Make it quick, Henderson, you're ruining my daughter's party. On the contrary, Mr. Henderson smiled slightly, pulling out a cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. I believe I am saving it. He put on his reading glasses and looked around the room. 3 years ago, when Wilma passed, she left the management of the company and the estate to Sterling under a temporary trust. You all assumed it was a permanent arrangement. You were wrong. He broke the seal. The sound of tearing paper was audible in the deathly silence. Wilma knew this family well, Mr. Henderson said, looking directly at my parents. She knew your greed, Sterling. She knew your vanity, Dolores. And she knew your weakness, Arlene. She feared her legacy, a company built on honesty and hard work, would be destroyed by those who only know how to consume. Therefore, he continued, she established an activation clause. The true ownership of the Belmont Corporation and 100% of the trust assets would transfer to her granddaughter, the first one to marry for virtue rather than profit. Gasps erupted. Arlene's jaw dropped. Preston dropped his fork. What? My father shouted. That is preposterous. I am her son. And Virginia is her granddaughter. Mr. Henderson raised his voice, drowning out the noise. I will now read Wilma's accompanying letter. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and began to read. His voice shifted, becoming warm and strong, as if Grandmother Wilma herself were standing in the room. My dearest Virginia, if you are hearing these words, it means you have done exactly what I hoped. You found a man who loves you for who you are, not for the Belmont name. And more importantly, you were brave enough to defend that love against your parents' prejudice. I know what your parents will do. I know they will mock your husband if he lacks status. I know they will threaten to disinherit you. That is why I had to keep this secret until the very last moment. Russell is no stranger to me. I have followed his career since he was an apprentice. I hired his company to fix the library not by chance. I wanted to see if you could spot the value of a diamond in the rough. And you did. Sterling, my son, if you are hearing this, know that I am disappointed in you. You turned wealth into a weapon to bully your own child. You forgot our roots as weavers and laborers. Therefore, I strip you of control. Virginia, the moment you signed your marriage license with Russell, you became the chairwoman of the board of the Belmont Corporation and the sole beneficiary of the Wilma Belmont Trust. This house, this land, and the company, it all belongs to you. Use it to build. Do not use it to destroy as your father has. Love, Grandma Wilma. Mr. Henderson lowered the letter. The silence in the tent was no longer the silence of disdain. It was the silence of absolute terror. My father Sterling stood frozen, his face the color of ash. My mother Dolores collapsed back into her chair, clutching her chest. Arlene looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. They had just realized the floor beneath them had vanished. The house they lived in, the cars they drove, the bank accounts they drained. It was all mine now. I stood up. The trembling was gone. I looked at Russell. He smiled, a proud smile, but not a surprised one. She told me, he whispered. She made me promise not to tell you until today. She wanted you to make the choice, without the money influencing you. I turned to my father, who was stammering. Henderson, this is a forgery. My mother wouldn't do this to me. It is authentic Sterling, Mr. Henderson said coldly. The documents were sealed by the court and are effective immediately. Virginia is now your employer. The atmosphere in the tent shifted instantly. The high society guests began to whisper, their eyes darting from my parents to me with a newfound, calculating respect. Aunt Maxine and Aunt Lucille suddenly stopped talking, staring down at their plates. My father stumbled toward me, trying to force a grotesque, desperate smile. Virginia, sweetheart, you know what I said earlier. It was I just wanted to test you. I wanted to make sure your love was strong enough. Stop, Dad. I raised my hand, cutting him off. My voice was strangely calm. Don't insult my intelligence any further. You said exactly what you meant, and I heard every word. I turned to my mother. She was crying not out of remorse, but out of fear. Virginia, we are family. You wouldn't throw us out on the street, would you? Arlene, say something? Arlene looked at me, then at Preston, who was busy texting probably his lawyer to see how this affected their joint assets. Arlene hung her head. She knew the power had shifted. I took Russell's hand and walked onto the stage, standing next to Mr. Henderson. I took the microphone. "I won't throw anyone on the street," I said, looking straight at my parents. "Because I am not cruel like you. You may continue to live here, in the guest house. The main mansion will be closed for renovation and converted into the headquarters of the Wilma Belmont Charity Foundation." Gasps filled the room. The guest house where Russell had stayed, the place they deemed fit only for servants. "And as for the company," I continued, "Russell and I will be reviewing the entire board of directors. Anyone who does not respect Wilma's core values will be terminated, starting tomorrow." I set the microphone down. I didn't need to say anything else. I had reclaimed my dignity, not through bitter revenge, but through justice. Russell and I walked out of the tent across the lawn toward his battered pickup truck. We left behind the lavish feast, the panicking, designer-clad guests, and my parents crumbling under the weight of their own hubris. As we climbed into the truck, Russell squeezed my hand. "You okay, Madam Chairwoman?" I laughed, tears streaming down my cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm free." The truck rolled down the driveway, leaving the Belmont estate in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. My name is Virginia, and for the first time in my life that name belonged to me, not my family. As the sunset painted the sky red behind us, I realized something profound. Grandmother Wilma didn't leave me this fortune to make me rich. She left it to prove that a person's value isn't found in the label on their clothes or the title on their business card, but in how they treat others when they think no one is looking. My parents had all the money in the world, yet they were spiritually bankrupt. Russell had nothing in his pockets yet. He possessed everything that mattered. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to gain yourself. And sometimes the people who are looked down upon the most are the ones holding the keys to the kingdom. What do you think about how Virginia's parents behaved? Would you have been brave enough to choose love over money like she did? Leave a comment saying, "I choose love," if you believe character matters more than material wealth. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories about justice and courage. Thank you for listening to Virginia's story.